Hello, everyone, and welcome to the penultimate episode review of Loki on Disney+. I cannot believe we're here. It's your boys, Cam. Say hello.
What up?
And Kirk, coming in hot with Spilled Popcorn, where we spill the latest and the greatest on the latest and greatest streaming series. We're talking about Loki right now. We've done WandaVision. We've done Tafatwas, aka this Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and now we're doing Loki. It's here, episode 5. All I have to say is I was not prepared for such a perfect episode of television.
How could you have been? How could you have been? I mean, none of us were ready.
It's impossible. It would have been impossible unless you were a member of the TVA and you were sneaking back in time to talk about it, to disseminate information. It was incredible. I mean, you know, we started off this series. People said that the episode 1 was the greatest Marvel episode ever, right? Within the 3 that we've had. Also comparing with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but you know, no contest there with any of these series that we've had, unfortunately. But what we saw from this episode was just the exact theme and concept of what it was. Pure magic throughout the entirety of the episode.
Yeah, I think for me, you know, I think I said early on that I was giving WandaVision the leg up. I think early on, probably through the first 3 episodes of this series. Episode 4 was awesome. Episode 5 was better. So
yeah,
now I feel like Loki is firmly in my top spot out of these 3, followed by WandaVision, followed by the Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah, I think it's a tight fit. I'm with you too. It goes Loki, and then WandaVision is sitting right against it. We'll see what happens in the final episode 6 next week. But before we do, I want to talk about episode 5. Let's get into the unwrapping.
Let's unwrap it.
Oh, almost lost my paper. Then this show would end. Listen, this episode was crazy. We start off with Sylvie versus Ravonna. Ravonna's buying time. There's this weird pride that Ravonna has because there are things she doesn't know that she is exposing that she doesn't know. But there's also things that she does know that she's still concealing in these moments. We can't really pinpoint what those are, but holy cow, Gugu, you are an incredible actress, and I expect so much of you for the future of television and cinema. I'm just blown away by her. Sylvie prunes herself in a big old fight shortly after. There's some back and forth cut scenes between Sylvie just pulling information out of Ravonna, and it's really exciting. Of course, Loki officially meets all the other Lokis at the end of time, plus Alioth, this cloud temporal eating monster that everything it touches it consumes, and that is it. Gone forever. It's crazy. Monster in the sky. Pretty crazy how they talk about civilizations have been dropped in there. They've been pruned and they're gone in an instant. This thing is just out of this world, more power than anything. But we've seen monsters like this before, and that's why at the end of this episode, Alioth gets enchanted by 2 Lokis, 3 if you're really counting, if you're counting classic. We get a chance to see the hideout that the 4 Lokis, our 4 main Lokis besides 2012 Loki, have concocted, which is super exciting, and it's like a game, and it's like it's a challenge. You know, there's lots of different meanings behind them being in a bowling alley where you play a game where the pins fall and they get reset. Very exciting, all very intentional, fun stuff by the production crew. I love Miss Minutes in this episode as well. She's clearly in on the conspiracy, even more than we possibly know. This little cartoon AI who's seemingly supposed to just do whatever you ask her to really has a mind of her own, or a different directive from someone above Miss Ravonna and the robot timekeepers. There's some really fun scenes in here where we get to see and listen to all of the Nexus events. So the Nexus event sharing of all the Lokis, that's exciting and enticing. And then, of course, we have a couple other big moments as the Loki fights, all of the Lokis showing up. In addition to the 4 that we see, Gator Loki eats one of the other Loki's hands, which is incredible. They went there, the enchantment of Alioth, and so much more. Cam, what else am I missing?
I don't know. I think that's it. I mean, I would have been totally chill with like an entire Gator Loki episode, to be honest with you, just like a Gator Loki origin story. That would have been fantastic. I would have been totally there for it. Just no dialogue, just like alligator noises and drama. I would have lived for that. But this was good too.
I think, you know, how they make the different screensavers, you know, the classic one at Christmas is like you got the fireplace crackling. Well, what if we just have Gator Loki in the water, just like looking around, very still, in some calming rushing, like a stream? You know, I could get down with that.
Yeah, he got his own character poster from Disney Plus. They released that today. It was majestic and glorious and amazing, and I loved it. And also, listening back to last week's episode, I totally flip-flopped the anatomical differences between crocodiles and alligators, which is why we were so confused. But confirmed, it's an alligator, and it's better that way because alligators are cool. So yeah, it's great. Love it.
Hey, that's okay, because I still don't know which way is which way you said. It's all upside down to me between alligators and crocodiles.
Up until this year, I thought the difference was that alligators were freshwater and crocodiles were saltwater. And then I learned that that's not the case, and now I'm done for. I'm like, if that's not the difference, then what is? You know,
we need a series on Gator Loki strictly to tell us the science behind the difference.
Exactly.
Alligators. Oh my goodness, that's fantastic. Well, so much really to discuss here. So much to speculate on here later on in this episode as well. So let's dive into this as well, into the butter.
Let's do it.
First up, the Nexus events.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the Nexus events that happen with these other Lokis. Obviously, it's important. Obviously, going back to WandaVision, how cool it was and how sneaky it was to drop the commercial about Nexus, right? The headache medicine, right? So we have Gator Loki ate the wrong neighbor's cat. Embarrassing. What was boastful Loki's? I can't quite remember. Did they ever reveal his, or is he was just such a liar that we never get to his? Is that what the kind of the joke was?
I don't know that they do reveal his.
Because he lies about it. He basically says that he got all the Infinity Stones. And
that's right.
He goes through a couple iterations.
Yeah, so we don't know his actual Nexus event.
Yeah, which is smart. That plays to his character of boastful Loki. You know, he's just talking out of his butt, right? Mm-hmm. And then we get classic Loki, and he faked his death, his inevitable death with Thanos. He faked it, and there he is.
This isn't the Richard E. Grant. This isn't the Richard E. Grant classic Loki. It predates that, but it's still the same vibe.
I'm sorry, is there going to be an actual Richard E. Grant?
Yeah, there's also going to be an Alligator Loki Funko Pop, and I will purchase that immediately.
This is incredible. This is really incredible. Gator Loki can go right behind you next to Jaws, right
absolutely.
Behind on the shelf. But it's really fascinating that classic Loki's Nexus event, he faked his death with Thanos, and he with incredible illusion, power, and magic and deception, and then he floated off as debris into the universe, just contemplating life, like as this philosopher, until eventually the TVA caught him. It just shows you how patient classic Loki can be. And one of the things that he says also that plays very true to the end of this episode is that blades are worthless in the face of a Loki sorcery. The strength, I can't read my own writing, it stunts our magical potential. Blades are worthless in the face of a Loki sorcery. It stunts our magical potential. And we see it full force at the end here. He has no blade, no dagger in his hand. He is just using his own sorcery to summon a city to make Alioth want to attack that more. And then, of course, Kid Loki just, as a one-off line, says, "I killed Thor." Done.
Beast.
What do you think about all of these? Which one entices you the most?
Well, I think it has to be classic Loki. I think his story is the most interesting because it's the closest to our Loki, and it answers an interesting question of what would Loki have done had he survived the Thanos event. I mean, of course, our Loki ends up going out in a blaze of glory. basically sacrificing himself for his brother, which is the ultimate end to his arc, though we know it kind of wasn't the end of his arc because we're still here. But this idea that a Loki could experience that and then go on to have this sort of spiritual awakening that everywhere I go, death follows. So why don't I just not go anywhere and do anything? Why don't I just be, having that existential realization is really cool. And I love at the end, whenever he's, conjuring up this huge castle for Alioth to feast on, this huge illusion, Loki says, I think we're more powerful than we realize, because he figures out that so much of what it means to be a Loki is what burdens them and keeps them from reaching their full potential. All of that mischief and trying to win and losing and trying to scam, and it holds them back from being who they are. So I feel like that dagger quote that you threw out was sort of metaphorical, the dagger being a metaphor for all of the twisting and conniving and all the stuff that they try to do to get ahead. Yes. It actually holds them back from being who they can be. So he was the perfect conduit for that story. Classic Loki. What a great character he has been in such a short amount of time.
Yes, and who would have expected when you see that group right at the end credit scene at the last episode, you're like, well, obviously we're going with Kid Loki. He's youthful, he's spry, or it's going to be boastful Loki. Look at him, he's giant. We know we won't get much out of Gator Loki, unfortunately. That was just a given. But to go with classic Loki and to use his wisdom throughout all of it was so great. It was so great. I just love that dagger theory you just threw out there. My mind is blown. So thank you for that. Even we see in this end of time where time has not been written yet. We were at the end of the line, if you will, to quote Captain America. Mm-hmm. We have Mjolnirs in the soil, just dug underneath there. It's how'd that get there? Is it because of Kid Loki? Is it because of a different variant or a Thor variant? Do you know anything about this? Any Thor variants in your comic book reading?
Well, there are Thor variants, but I mean, we saw one in this episode. We saw Throg. Whenever they're panning down through the ground to go into the Loki lair, we see Throg, who is Frog Thor, jumping around in there, and he's actually voiced by Chris Hemsworth. So we got up close and personal. That is a Thor variant from a different Earth, who ends up becoming enchanted and turned into a frog, and then becomes Thor as a frog because he is worthy. Wish we could have gotten more Throg. I can see why they didn't do that. Would have been cool. But there are other variants of Loki. There are other variants of Thor that have been around. So who knows? Who knows whose Mjolnir that was? I mean, we know boastful Loki has a Mjolnir too, so it could be anything really.
I mean, maybe we'll get Frog Thor and Gator Loki in their own spin-off series.
I mean, Gator Loki and Throg is the battle we all need to see. I would pay-per-view that.
Yes. Oh man, I think there's a good cartoon series for kids coming out there, or live action. I'm fine with either one. I'll take either one. So then I want to talk about some other crazy things. I want to go back to the bowling alley specifically. That hideout is so much more than what it seems on the surface. Anything that stood out to you in there or throughout the end of time void for you, Cam?
Well, I just love this idea that there's all these Lokis there. And the reason that they're there is because they're survivors. They just won't go away. They just cannot be defeated. So the fact that Mobius is there. Yeah, there are other people there, but these are the guys who have stuck around, and even after being sent to the end of time, have managed to escape the clutches of Alioth, the evil cloud lion monster, to the point where there's just 20 Lokis hanging out. I just love that. That's such a great story.
Yes, I love the touches of. You mentioned Mobius. I forgot to say that in the unwrapping is that he survived and he gets dropped here. Sylvie prunes herself to avoid Ravonna. She ends up here. This is the dumping ground, as was one of our questions, was do they get their own individual holding cell at the end of time wherever you go when you get pruned, or same place, which is still a big question because I thought that one of the Minutemen that gets pruned, I thought she got pruned, but she actually went to jail, but maybe she didn't get pruned. Hunter
B-15, I guess did not. I rewatched 4 and we do not see her get pruned.
Okay.
But we don't see what happens with her because we just see that Ravonna and Sylvia are the last 2 standing, but Hunter B-15 must have gotten out of there somehow.
Gotcha. So then it's safe to say you get pruned, you end up here with Alioth. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
One of the things that I loved is like these little touches. I was looking in the background on my second watch so hard for the bowling alley specifically. We have this very prominent arcade game called, and I'm going to butcher the name of it, Polybius or Polybius. It looks like your classic 80s arcade game sitting there. And apparently this is a big urban legend that has come around since the year 2000, which I didn't know new urban legends could come around after our time of being born. I thought they were all from like the 80s and before. So that's pretty crazy. This thing is something of a possibly an MK Ultra experiment, conspiracy theory, a government-run crowdsourced psychology experiment where they just put shapes in this game, and then suddenly the theory goes is that 2 teenage boys were playing it, and after they played this game, they disappeared forever. To suggest that they maybe unlocked something or they did well at it, and so they disappeared. It's very similar to our whole Nexus events. So you maybe you succeed, you outlive yourself, so you gotta go. You're not playing by the rules. You're doing too many puzzles, and it is a way of controlling free will or a restriction on free will, which is, there's all of that caked into Loki. How do you feel about that urban legend being thrown into, like, in so many shots? It's just there. It's the same game, and they're making sure that you can see those big letters.
It's just something fun for the fans. It's kind of like the DB Cooper thing, they're like, they're messing with time, and this whole variant thing just really makes the imagination spin. And so I'm sure they riffed off of a bunch of different ideas in their writing sessions, and they were like, oh, we got to throw that in. My favorite Easter egg in this episode, which, like, we don't have to go into all of them because it was chock full. There were tons everywhere. Of them. But the Thanos copter, yes. That was, you can see it out in the, like, I don't know, the grassy plains of like the marshland of the void. And that's a reference to some really, really old comics where, like, hilariously different from today's comics, where Thanos would, like, he, like, literally flew a helicopter that said Thanos on the side of it. And it's been, like, a really fun, like, memeable type thing. I believe in that same series, Thanos, like, gets defeated and just gets, like, arrested by the police and goes to prison.
Why not?
So it's, like, very different times for comics, but that was such a fun tie-in.
I can yield the Infinity Stones, but yes, cuff me and I am powerless. Yes, that makes perfect sense. Yep. Perfect sense. So those are the big hitters. Of course, then the last thing we have, the last 2 things of the Buddha, is that classic Loki's magic as he's summoning the city in this incredible heroic moment, because he knows that he will be sacrificed in some regard so that Loki 2012 and Sylvie can hopefully fulfill their mission and move forward in time. Loki turns to Sylvie because she asks, how is he doing that? And Loki says, I think we're stronger than we realize. Hearing the quote earlier about swords versus sorcery. So just such a cool moment, because this just gives us an opportunity to say, what are we going to see from this Loki in the future? Is he going to survive this series, and B, what else? We've seen so many things, and we get to see him and Sylvie enchant Alioth together in this beautiful and powerful, exciting moment.
Yeah, unlocking a new ability for our Loki, which has been missing from his repertoire up until now. I think that was one of the things I was really looking for in this series, is, like, if we're going to do a Loki show, we need to see Loki, like the real Loki. We need to see all of his tricks. We've seen his ability to shapeshift. We've seen his ability to create, multiples of himself and do those sorts of things. But the enchantment, the magic beyond those sorts of abilities has been gone up till now. And so it was cool that they used that moment to unlock this new ability that I think if they decide to keep him around past, let's say Doctor Strange 2, he might be a very interesting person to have on the team, question mark, who really knows where they go from there. But yeah.
Yes, I love it. I think that we should speculate madly. Are you ready to do that?
I am. Yes, always.
Let's get into the crumbs. I really wish in that moment that I had prepared some breadcrumbs to then sprinkle all over myself. And now I know what's going to happen in episode 6.
Yes.
Coming up next week. So we're stronger than we realized. Could Loki become even more powerful of diverging with all these other Lokis? We just chatted about that. Do we think, $1 million question, do we think Loki 2012 survives next week's episode?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I'm a confident yes. I think he survives. I don't think he has much more time left in the MCU because I think it will cease to make sense, pretty soon here. But I think he serves a purpose as of now and will escape this series and then will die in some sort of major event. Or we'll ride off into the Tuscan sunset like classic Loki, and just be gone. Ski. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe it could be that if Kang is the big bad, which is, 99% likely at this point, right?
Yes.
If there's no one bigger than him that the MCU is coming in with their left hook, then this could be the final Tom Hiddleston Loki story arc that we see. However, that plays out through the rest of this phase. I agree with you. Before this episode, I was dead set on Tom Hiddleston dying in this series. Even after my first watch, I was still considering, maybe Kang just offs him not as soon as they see him, but relatively soon. But then maybe she offs him and maybe Sylvie goes back and we go again. I don't know.
Maybe there's a situation where you know how like Hulk in Infinity War goes toe to toe with Thanos, watches Heimdall and Loki die, then gets like rainbow bridged back to Earth and is like, Thanos is coming. There could be a situation here where like Sylvie shows up at the Sanctum Sanctorum and like is like, Loki's dead. Like Kang is coming, right? Like yes. maybe Kang kills Loki and then, she shows up at Doctor Strange's Inner Sanctum and that's one of the catalyst events for Multiverse of Madness.
I love this. Tell us about this building, Cam, because I know that you have done lots of research. So Alioth Enchanted, it clears and we see this building. It's almost like a castle, almost like a 1960s research building that's falling apart. What do you know about this?
Well, I mean, I have to admit, when I first saw it, my first thought was Doctor Doom. This looks like Doomstadt, the Latvian home of Doctor Doom when he builds that, great castle, and it's very ominous and scary. I mean, that's what that image conjures up when you see it. Like, I don't immediately go to Kang when I think of castle, though, Kang is that kind of guy as well. He's into big metaphorical gestures, big displays of how great he is and things like that, and obviously is well versed in history and architecture and things of that nature. So it could be him, but my to be honest, my first thought was Doctor Doom. Now let's pump the brakes. I do not think we're getting any sort of Fantastic Four reveal in next episode. I've learned my lesson from WandaVision. I don't think it's happening. So I think this is Kang. I think this is Kang's castle. I think he's been chilling at the end of time. Makes sense given his character history. Makes sense given the fact that you have Alioth here. Alioth has only ever appeared in the comics in issues where Kang and Ravonna are the main antagonists. So putting the puzzle pieces together here, like, it continues to point to Kang, and now the arrow is like flashing. Like, I think this is it. I think this is where we get our Kang sighting for the first time. I think in episode 6. I think it's gonna shock the world. I think it's gonna turn the internet on fire, and it's gonna be big. That's my thought here.
Yeah, this one, I really, there have been a couple of times throughout these 5 episodes where I have watched a little bit of the front of the episode at like 2 a.m. on Tuesday night leading into Wednesday. And I'm like, okay, I just wanted to see if there was anything big. I get like 15 minutes in, I pass out, right? So I really think I might just need to stay awake and watch this whole thing this week. I don't know. It's a terrible idea. I know this from a real life person with a real life job's point of view, but I think I might do it because there's going to be no safe place on the internet the following day. Not a single place.
Yeah, it's been getting touch and go here anyway. I would say the last few Wednesdays have been pretty tough. Like if you're on Twitter, just you'll see trending topics and it'll be like, Kang, and you're like, oh god, like and it's always just people like us talking about the possibility of Kang. It's never like actually Kang, but it always freaks me out, makes my heart stop a little bit whenever I see it. But I do think this is it. I think this is where we meet Jonathan Majors as Kang. I think there's a reason, like I said, that we know about this casting already, and we're over a year away from his first appearance in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. So I'm very excited. And it's one of those things that's so frustrating. Like we've theorized about all these different things, and yet it all makes so much sense that where they got dumped was the end of time. Like that makes sense. Where do you send something that you don't want to exist? You send it to where time is still being written, where they can't mess up this timeline that it all makes sense. And when they ended up there with Alioth and everything, it's like, duh, like of course, like why didn't I think of that? Which of course the answer is I'm not as smart as Michael Waldron and Kate Herron and the people who made this fantastic show, but it's exciting. It's very exciting.
The writers for this show and for all the MCU series and films, of course, they have such an important job in making things make sense and stay close enough to the original material and not just try to surprise you with like fake outs. And, if the goal is to introduce Kang, you have to introduce him with real things and not pull like a what if scenario and then like just throw it in to make it crazy. This really is like they've connected all the dots and it's like, yeah, it was here all along, kind of like Agatha. It was Agatha all along. It's like, boom, we showed you our hand the entire time, and now we're pulling it together for you. So that's part of the brilliance of the creative teams, and that's why it's so good, because there's no trickery, even in especially a series with Loki, of the God of Mischief.
Yeah. And important things to keep in mind, just like interesting little notes. So Michael Waldron is the showrunner for this. So he's the mind behind the story that's going on here. So the written for television by, that credit is Michael Waldron. Same person is writing Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. He's the screenwriter on that movie. We saw a similar thing over the weekend with Black Widow. Jacqueline Schaefer, who wrote WandaVision, was one of the writers on Black Widow as well. So this is the new wave of creative minds behind Marvel, and I have to say I think they're doing a great job so far.
It's great. It's really smart to have them connected between both worlds. Yes. Something that the DC should take a good hard look at. Same actors, same writers, same production teams.
Well, yeah, and we know that the MCU traditionally doesn't like to use the same directors over and over again, with the exception of a few who get to direct their whole series and whatnot. Like the John Wattses of the world, the Russo brothers, etc. But using writers between properties is very smart. Like you said, Kirk, very smart, keeps things in line, keeps them grounded, keeps them from getting tunnel vision on their project. It's the way to do it, I think.
Yes. Well, I don't know about you, Cam, but I'm just going to sleep until 1:59 tomorrow night, because tonight is Monday, recording of this. I don't know anymore, because time is just an endless series of Nexus events and branches. That's how I see life. Is there anything else you want to bring to the table tonight before we sign off?
Well, the only other thing is I'm very curious what happens with Sylvie after this series. I I don't see how they kill her or send her off. I mean, people are starting to really love this character for good reason. But where does she fit? Where does she fit? And where do her and Loki fit in the future? And obviously they both committed to each other in a really nice, intimate moment that they are going to figure out whatever's happening together. And they're with it. They're with each other to figure this out and to fulfill their destiny. So that's just something that's going to be on my mind for a little while until we find out. We've got a lot of questions to answer in episode 6. A lot of questions. I don't know that all of them will be tied up real nice. So we'll see what happens.
I don't think they will. We'll see if the Ice Prince and the Ice Princess need a blanket. Very, very cute, very funny, very ironic. The whole thing. Again, just the nuances of that are brilliant as well. I'm so glad you said that. Where does Sylvie go? I was a taker or leaver at the beginning of this because I'm like a Tom Hiddleston truist, but now I'm like, but after that episode 3, I was like, yeah, we'll keep her. Yeah, that sounds good. And after this one, I'm like, no, you can't kill her.
Yeah, please, more Sylvie.
No, kill anyone else but her. So that's all we got tonight for Spilled Popcorn, everyone. Please subscribe to our podcast also on Popcorn for Breakfast, the lead umbrella on all of this. We're going to play you out with some original music from our friends over at Rhetoric. Check them out on Spotify and anywhere else you can find good music. We'll talk to you next week, the finale of Loki.
Woo! Bye.